Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of 1+1, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. It's February 27th and Black History Month in North America. The US and Canada is almost done, so who better to discuss the plight of Black people and discuss the state of affairs of the Black diaspora in the US than Elaina Porter. Elaina rejoins me on 1+1. She is a member of the Pendo Center for Human Rights and Self-Determination. Pendo is not just a Black civil rights organization, but it's a Black radical self-determination advocacy group following the tradition of Paul Robeson and W.E. Du Bois. We Charge Genocide campaign and Malcolm X's similar campaign before his tragic murder. She's my guest and looking forward to this conversation. So, Elaina, welcome back to 1+1.
Thank you for having me, Youri.
It's an honor to have you back on again. And before we get to, my first question I wanted to talk to you about is I'd like to ask briefly, if it's even possible, who are some of the folks part of your movement who've been harassed by the powers to be, who aren't getting the attention they deserve from even the best Black leftist media? And if they do, of course, and if they do get coverage, of course, they're deemed extremists. They're already found guilty of whatever propped up crime by the corporate press. So who are some of those activists you want people to know about? And if people can help, how can they help and get in touch, especially because it is Black History Month?
Yes. Well, one of the activists that I work closely with, his name is Brother Ramsey Eunice. He has the People's Detroit movement in Detroit, where the Afro-Descendants, the majority population of Afro-Descendants, they're in the process of exercising self-determination on a municipal level. And what has happened is they have withdrawn their consent from the local government in Detroit, and they're exercising their right to self-determination and asserting their property rights by recovering those abandoned homes and redistributing them to homeless persons in Detroit.
Wow!
And
Brilliant.
that person has been deemed as a criminal offender. He's been accused of taking property, and there's some other issues that have been involved with his movement. He has had an injunction placed against him, and he has also been incarcerated, him and some of the members, several times up in Detroit. And his name is Brother Ramsey Eunice.
Okay.
And after the show, I will submit you his information and contact information, because he does need the exposure. He does need positive media. He has been depicted as a scam artist in the mainstream media nationally here in the United States.
Okay, and any other any other people that have been that are associated with Pendo that have also been targeted and harassed, that you feel people, especially Black leftist media, however small or popular they are, need to focus their attentions on to?
There are several other cases that are pending. We have several brothers that were in the militia movement that has court cases coming up, and some of who could be put in the category of political prisoners, but I am not privy to their court information and to the charges that they have, so I'm not willing to speak publicly on that, or put any thing in the media right now, because sometimes we unknowingly perpetuate misinformation. And because I have not really looked into those cases to see whether or not they fall under the jurisdiction of political prisoners, I'm not ready to speak on that right now.
No problem. And well, I look forward to the links and the contact information you'll give me, so that hopefully people do that hopefully people at least follow Ramsey Eunice, right?
Yes, I will definitely submit you Brother Ramsey Eunice's information, because he has been boots on the ground. He has since 2015 or 16 been advocating for the homeless persons up in Detroit and advocating for U.S. Afro-Descendants. And he's basically been doing this by himself along with some of the other members. But he needs that momentum so he can build a capacity that he needs to be successful. And as I stated, with the other persons, they are part of militias. I haven't seen any court records. I hadn't seen any documents, nor do I have their permission to speak on their behalf. So I will refrain from giving any information concerning them at this time.
No problem. And I would love to ask you, changing subject a bit, is I would love to ask you, what are the current state of affairs when it comes to impoverished communities in the U.S. Of areas mainly populated by Blacks and Latinos, and what is the relationship status between the two colonized, marginalized groups? Are they good? Or are they still, or is there still issues of unity and solidarity that needs to be worked on? And how is the level of gang violence in Black communities like South Central Los Angeles or New York or Chicago or elsewhere? Is it still, very bad like it was in the 80s and 90s?
Yes.
And oh, okay. And so that being said, what is the stupid question, but what is the reasons for that then?
Okay, well, let me go back to your first question about Black Americans or foundational U.S. Afro-Descendants relationship with our Hispanic brothers and sisters. Now, I live here in the South, and the relationship that we have is cordial. I haven't seen any violence towards each other. Of course, we have our biases because of the oppression that we both are under. In order to get ahead, we do have preconceived biases towards each other. We can't deny that. However, we have to establish dialogues and partnerships and find out in what ways can we work together. Here in the South, it's about who can get employment, who can get the most accommodations in the school system. And the persons who are getting that are the Latino group, because they have people that advocate from that human rights perspective. Like, there is a focus on the language barrier in our areas, in our school systems, because their advocates advocate for that, for those safety nets and to close those gaps so those children can learn. From our perspective, we have our advocates who just look at this as a, how can I put it, as a deficiency. They don't look at the fact that we don't speak the same language as Europeans. This is our second language, and our children have distinct language barriers. We speak a creolized version of English, but we don't speak complete English because we're not the same persons. And when you bring this up in the school systems and in these meetings, you're considered as radical or outlandish, when the backstory on it is the same rule applies to Hispanic children, should apply to Afro-Descendants here in the United States.
Okay, interesting. So the relations. So of course there are some issues between the Black community and Latino community, but but the issue is that while there have been some strides to improve the plight of Latino communities, whether they're in the country legally or otherwise. I remember when I lived in California, the school did not want me speaking French at home, and hence why I lost my French. Yet I was forced to learn Spanish in school, and I thought that was quite, I thought that was quite, quite bizarre. And it goes to show you that, that the Latinx community do have people advocating, and they are at a point where they can speak their language in whatever businesses they run. There are even and people are even taught to be bilingual to accommodate them. And of course, this goes into the heart of what's so of white supremacy in the U.S. because this is just one example where I just where how can I explain? I mean, it's like the complaints that a lot of Black people get, which is like, how come there's no special incentives to help grow our small businesses in our communities, but the South Korean immigrant merchant or or the Chinese entrepreneur can get a get a heads up, can have their businesses subsidized, and even if their businesses aren't subsidized, they're they're not met with the same level of white supremacy, institutional racism that Black people experience, right?
That's true. And I hate to say it, but when it comes to the image of Black Americans, these immigrants, most of them, including some Africans that I've even encountered, they see the negative images and the negative personas depicted, how Afro-descendants in the United States are depicted, and they bring those biases to the table. They bring those, and even so, when like we have a large Asian population that does business in our areas, a large Indian population, and in those areas where they have their businesses, in most cases, we're mistreated because they bring those preconceived notions that they got from colonizers to our neighborhoods, and they mistreat us. So yes, there are needs for us to mend our relationship with the immigrants, especially those who do business with us, and we should establish partnerships. But the first thing we have to do is establish a dialogue, and that's something that, from my perspective, that we need to work on. But the first thing that I work on, my first priority, is self-determination and putting us in the correct political configuration so we can be self-sufficient, and we can exercise some type of authority over our lives and over the institutions and the systems that we depend on.
And two quick follow-ups then. Number one, because you mentioned the Asian communities, I mentioned the South Korean merchants. What are the relations between between Black people and and the South Korean small business owners that that control some of the liquor shops, the night shops? Because I often rewatch documentaries of the South Central Los Angeles uprisings that took place in the 90s after the brutal beating of Rodney King, the murder of the Black girl that was murdered by a Korean store merchant. Of course, the police were acquitted. The South Korean woman who murdered the Black girl that she got into a heated argument with, she was given probation and no jail time. And of course, that lit the fire, which which caused the uprisings in South Central Los Angeles. How are relations between between the Korean small owner business class and the mainly Black working class nowadays?
Well,
Have they improved?
from here in the South, in my location, I haven't had any issues with any Korean merchants. And we had a grocery store, it's closed now. The person that actually operated that store he hired Black people. He was very active in the Black community. So we do have Asian merchants that establish a wonderful relationship with the Black community. Now, that person did retire. He stayed in business over 20 years in my area. And that's the type of relationship that I like to harp on. We do have a South Korean company here in Georgia, I must say, that's doing a wonderful job by building relationships and hiring minority workers. they're very diverse in their hiring practices. And I'm liking what I'm seeing. I like what I see. So I think there is a opportunity there for us to build relationships. But I think Black people allow our counterparts to get in the way of building those relationships, or we don't establish the line of communication that we need with the peoples such as the South Koreans who would like to do business. We allow the biases to infiltrate our relationship with them when we should be up front and center, because we're the one patronizing them, especially in our areas. Now, with regard to this large employer, they're doing wonderful jobs, a wonderful job in their hiring practices. They're up and coming, growing industry, and I'm proud to see that they are located where they are. And I do see things really going well. There needs to be some work, but when it comes to building relationships and establishing partnerships, I do see this South Korean company really going places. And with the backstory of South Korea as a nation, I got an opportunity to do a little research. I was unaware that they did help with some of the peacekeeping in East Timor, and they did training in agribusiness, and they helped put in infrastructure when they were there with the United Nations. So they have a history of working with oppressed groups, and that kind of explains why they have such a diverse outlook and positive aspect in their hiring practices. They brought that to our state.
That's fantastic to hear. That's brilliant to hear. And you mentioned that sadly the level of gang violence in places like Chicago, New York, South Central Los Angeles, and similar places are not doing good. That situation's not that situation's not improving. Stupid question. So stupid question I have to ask: why is that situation not?
Well, the situation has not improved because, number one, there's no safety nets for those youth. There's no safety nets for those families, and we're depending. And this is from my perspective, and everything that I say on this broadcast are my opinions and based on the realities and facts that I see, is because there's no political agenda. We don't have control over institutions that we need to put the systems in place to correct the problem. When you have harsh policing, you have a harsh family and children's services that's adversarial to the persons who need the help. You can't expect any type of growth or any type of issues or social improvement on the social problems, because we don't control the systems that's needed to address the issue. For example, in some of these areas, we're the majority population. So we should be in control of the policing. Policing should be modified.
Community control over the police.
That's right. Not only community control, I'm saying a full withdrawal of the adversarial organizations in our areas where we're the majority population, where we put our own people in. We establish our own method of policing that incorporates restorative justice, similar to the methods that the Native Americans use. And that's some of the things that I propose. The policing is too heavy-handed for an oppressed group like ourselves. Most of the calls to service are for street crimes, which are based on the economic crimes. A lot of those areas, such as Detroit, the jobs have been taken out of those areas. They live in dilapidated, gentrified infrastructure. These are legal and political issues that have to be addressed, where we need the control, we need the authority to go in and do what we need to do for our people. We don't need middlemen. We need those adversarial institutions and adversarial persons out of our areas. Afro-descendants here in the United States, we're one of the most intellectually capable capable, academically capable people on the planet. We don't need any more benign neglect or integrationist, paternalistic policies, or people who are promoting that in our areas. It's time for us to advance to self-determination if we are going to address those areas, that we need. Our gangs, we have gangs because we haven't created the space for those youth. We failed them. Black America has failed their youth. That's in a discussion. We failed them in education. We failed them in any type of social safety net that is possible for them to have. We're handing them genocide. We've handed them fratricide. That's what you see in those areas. It's not black on black crime or gang violence. That is fratricide. The same thing is in Sierra Leone, and the same thing that happened in Sri Lanka. That's what we're going through. And we have leaderships that don't even know how to use the international human rights framework to assess the situation, to deal with the problem.
Unbelievable. And that's why people need to check out your organization, because your organization does deal with that on a very anti-colonial perspective, and just looking at what the laws that have been agreed on with international law and so forth. And yeah, the Black Miss Leadership class. I mean, we can talk forever about what Black Agenda Report calls the Black Miss Leadership class, because the amount of very well funded, mostly Democrat Black politicians who supported the get tough on the crime laws, who continue to lionize the Clintons despite the Clinton crime bill, who don't do anything to say we need to stop the drug war, we need to have a different approach to drug consumption and drug abuse, and the amount of them that support also policies like gentrification. And I hope I'm not sounding like a racist, or a narrow nationalist, but the amount of businesses which are given to outside entrepreneurs as opposed to Black entrepreneurs and so forth.
Well, yeah. Brother Youri, if I may apply the colonial model for that. We are not guests here in the United States, and that's what I always allude to. We have, just like the United States have territorial integrity, so do we as a colonized people. But because we don't know our rights as a colonized people, and we don't know how to utilize the international human rights framework to secure the authority in our areas, that's going to continue to happen. If you don't have the correct political configuration, you're going to have that leakage of resources going to other persons. And this is nothing against our immigrant brothers and sisters, because guess what? They're running from colonialism too. We just suffer from it internally. So I don't want to create a great divide between what our immigrant African brothers and sisters, who since Libya was toppled, I want to draw attention to the fact, yes, we have seen an increase in North African immigrants from Somalia and other areas such as that in Africa. And it's not because of them. We want to go back down to what's happening in South America. Our Afro-descendant, Indigenous, and other oppressed groups in Latin America, they're being murdered in droves. Their resources are being taken. The peasants down in South America are losing their farms, their agribusiness, to corporations.
Yeah.
So if we, as an Afro-descendant here in the United States, I am not going to sit here and say that what they're going through is not on the equal footing that we're going through. What I'm saying is, we're not the guest. We're not guests here. So we have to put ourselves in the correct political configuration to get the greatest impact from our numbers, so we can get control of our lives. We're living in genocidal conditions. Not that I'm taking away from anything that any other immigrant is going through. I focus on Black Americans, foundational Black Americans, what our needs are. And the reason why that yes, the powers that be can give that loan to those immigrants is because we haven't asserted our international human rights to control our areas, to control our spaces. We should have had the same status that would have given us the same control as the Native Americans. The Native Americans don't have that complaint that other people are getting loans because they've secured their right for self-determination and they operate from a nation to nation point of view with the United States. We're just the mob. We haven't aggregated our political power. So I can't blame the immigrants for something for our shortcoming.
Exactly. And I hope I didn't, hope I didn't sound like a bigoted black nationalist when I said that. Because I completely agree with you on that.
And I hope I didn't. And to my black radical brothers and sisters, I hope I don't sound as an apologist for our immigrant brothers and sisters. I'm just saying we can't afford to continue to build these great divides. Exactly. One moment, brother Youri. I'm going to mute myself. One moment.
And in fact, if I can say one thing, people also should be joining the Black Alliance for Peace, which is an anti-imperialist organization. That organization is also that organization is trying to address the plight of nations which have been targeted by American imperialism. So I just wanted to point that out. However, Elaina, some people would say, although this is a conversation we're going to save for another day, this is why I wanted to bring on a Black Canadian brother or sister. Some people would say that the Native Americans, though, are if America was a racial caste system, the Native Americans would be the sort of Dalits, the untouchables of that system. But we're not going to get into that. But that's going to be a conversation we're going to save for another time about about the plight of Native Americans, which ones are doing better than the others, why some are doing better than the others. But we're going to save that conversation for another day. Wait, where was I? Oh yes. Now, another issue I want to specifically talk to you about, which is your organization wants radical self-determination for Black Americans, and remind me and anyone who watches and listens to this program how you'd like to see self-determination envisioned for our people. Would it be a series of states within a state, or a whole new Black nation amicably divorced from white multicultural America, in which if Latinos and Indigenous people want, they can come live in that state, where you think they'll have a much better social contract compared to the current state of white-dominated America?
That's a wonderful question. I propose that we practice internal self-determination, internal sovereignty. I don't propose that we take on different states or whatever have you. It can be done on a local level, but we're the majority population where we politically assume jurisdiction over those areas and get rid of the administration that's there. I don't propose that we that we get rid of the lines that we have, or we all move to a distinct area, because we've already been segregated. Detroit, for instance, here in Atlanta, we're segregated by zip codes, we're segregated by the economy, and we're segregated by poverty. What I propose is that we take it from here and we have authority transfers. Now, I propose that we come in as a confederated tribal nation state, because what it is that we need a government. We already have the territory because we're the majority population in 732 cities. So all we need is authority transfers. That means if we have an adversarial police department, we get them out and we put our own people in. So I admonish that we advance the confederated social construct. That way all U.S. Afro-Descendants and those who consider themselves as Aboriginal, because we do have a group here in the United States who don't associate themselves as Africans. They are that part of the Aboriginal people that were here. There were Black people that were already here. The Paleo-American was not a European. He was of a Melanesian, Australoid phenotype. So, I propose that we embrace the Arab states, the political configurations that we naturally developed into, confederate and exercise our right to self-determination through the political organ of a confederated tribal nation with free association relationship with the United States. So we could have some type of negotiated sovereignty where we can do business with non-adversarial countries on the African continent, non-adversarial countries on the American continent, on the Asian continent, and we will be able to grow into the 12th largest nation within the world. And we will be able to close those wealth gaps within 10 years.
Interesting. And
that's what I propose.
Yeah, and so these sort of states within a state. So say you have well, you've mentioned Detroit. So yeah, so let's talk about Detroit. So say you have a largely Black community in in Detroit, or yours truly, South Central Los Angeles, because I used to live in California, not LA, but California. So you have this largely Black population. So those would be kind of like a state within a state in which that community would sort of be like its own country and have its own jurisdiction.
We would have councils. We would have local councils on a municipal level, city councils on a certain city level, or on a state level. We would have councils or some type of form of government or assembly that will use the international and human rights law framework to get control over those institutions. Like, we need our own school system, hands down. We need our own, we need an authority transfer for our own policing, because the policing is heavy-handed. Most of the calls for service are due to economic crimes. Street crimes are economic crimes. We need an economist to put in the infrastructure, the financial and economic infrastructure, to bring those areas back to life. So we need an overhaul, and we can't get that under the current policy of integration and benign neglect. So we have no choice but to assert that other layer of rights. You have local rights, you have a national right, which is your state right, and you have your federal rights. And then what supersedes that is you have your international rights. Those are the rights that we can tap into to put that safety net, to put that layer of protection that we need, and that much needed political space to carve it out, so we can exercise self-determination and put the institutions that we need in specifically for us. The Native Americans have their own family and children services. They have their own policing. They control their areas. We do not.
Okay, interesting.
And we cannot, because we were never afforded that same right as the Native Americans. So what we're having to do is to go back and deconstruct legally and politically those barriers that was put in place after 1865, so we can go in and do what it is that we need to do to alleviate the fratricide, to alleviate the internal familial issues that we have.
A follow-up thing on because you're comparing the Black, the impoverished Black communities to Native Americans. Now, I know I've sent you millions of links on the plight of Native Americans. I know you also watch my show, and I've interviewed and I've interviewed twice Native Americans and I would sort of describe America as a racial caste system in which Native Americans are at the bottom of that. They are sort of like, the Dalits, the untouchables, and that Black America, or Black America, Latino America, and certain poor, impoverished immigrant groups have a much better. Have a much better.
Well, I would have to qualify that because I've looked at the material that you've seen, and I've also done research on my own. And I'm aware of certain Native American tribes that have received billions of dollars in reparations. They have control of their areas. They have control of their reservations, and they have some form of control over their resources. They control their casinos. They have an economic base. Some of those tribes have an economic base in place. They make millions off of casinos. They have a status that allows them control over their plight. There's some Native American tribes where they control their own justice system, where they use banishment instead of incarceration. So they have it much, much better than us politically. Now, in terms of their numbers, and because of the fact some of those tribes have kept those old outdated treaties, which is their choice, instead of tearing those treaties up and coming up with a new treaty that fit the current reality, of course they're going to be impoverished. But if they stay within that same domestic framework, working off that same treaty, yes, you're going to see that poverty. But I totally disagree with you because from a political aspect, they're doing much better than us. They have their casinos and they've received billions in reparations.
Okay, I'll politely agree to disagree, but that's very that's very interesting. You raised that, and I think so. And so basically, what you would like for Black people, for this new nation within a nation, and to have nation to nation relations with white America is it's sort of okay. Look at the arrangements that some of the Native American nations had with white America. Use the good. Definitely do not use the the bad in that, and because the fact that as you mentioned, some of these communities they have their own sort of self-governance. That's what you would like to see with Black America, right?
Yes, that's what I'm working towards, and that's what we're going to do. We're not asking anybody's permission. That's where we're headed. So, taking control, of the institutions that we need, and I'm not trying to take away from the hurt and the harms that the Native Americans are going through, but to say we're doing better than them, that's a misnomer because they have some form of authority over their lives. They've received some form of reparations. We haven't received 1/4 of reparations. And might I add, some of those tribes participated in the slave trade.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so we do have to have a conversation with them and build relationships and establish a dialogue and partner with them on not just advancing our lot and making life a little bit better for us, but how can we work together as a free association nation? We can do business with internally, set up internal markets, put in infrastructure. A lot of those Native American reservations and areas, they need infrastructure. They need water systems. We can help with that. We need assistance on, once we set up our judicial system or criminal justice system, we need to know, okay, what type of, when does restorative justice apply? When does banishment apply? What are some of the things and philosophies that you use? We can have that intellectual exchange. In mental health, we can apply some of the same remedies for psychological care because we experience the same trauma, Brother Youri. Some people don't realize Black Africans, our ancestors fought beside the Native Americans. We live together, we intermingle, we married, we're family. But we don't have those conversations because whether we like it or not, some of these Native American tribes adopted their colonial masters' ways. They bought into the slave trade. And up until lately, they didn't even want their Afro-descendant members who are part African, part Indian. They didn't even want them in their tribes, so they would not get part of the reparations. So when we have these discussions about the Native Americans, we need to not just look at it one-sided. We have to do research and put all of these things on the table and have that much needed conversation on where we are as two peoples who are oppressed. So it's not an issue of their oppression is greater than ours. Politically, they're in a much better position than we are. I think just legally, they've made some very bad choices to stay confined within the jurisdiction of the United States and not exercise those international rights that would give them the much needed autonomy and control over their resources so they can put in the infrastructure to advance their development.
I can't speak too much about poor decision making that the Native American political class made. I would just respond that they probably have their own misleadership class, the way the Latinx people have their misleadership class, the way Black people have our misleadership class, and of course queer communities and so forth. On the issue of some Native Americans participating in the slave trade. That is an issue that I am definitely going to save for another day. I actually, originally I actually wanted to invite somebody from Canada, in which Native American issues are top of the list of priorities that the left and the human rights movement addressed there. And I wanted to actually bring someone from Canada to actually discuss that issue, which you've mentioned to me both off the air and once on the air. So
now let me reiterate. Now, when you do this, make sure you're looking at the Native American tribes in the United States that participated. Now, I have no knowledge of any Canadian Indian tribes participating in the slave trade, but I do know very well, specifically here in the South, we have several Native American tribes that participated in the slave trade and that were racist as well. So that is an issue that needs to be addressed. And I think Dr. Claude Anderson even talks about in some of those treaties, the slaves that they had were supposed to get some form of repair, and they never got it to this day.
Okay.
So, that's another body of research that we can pursue. That way we'll have good information and good talking points when we do talk again, because like I said, I don't want to take away from their oppression or minimize their oppression to advance what we're trying to do. That's not what I'm here to do. But at the same token, I'm not going to minimize the foundational U.S. Afro-Descendants experience in oppression and historical relationship with some of these Indian tribes at our expense to advance their agenda either.
Okay. And well, I'll be looking forward to hopefully organizing that discussion, because I know I had some people who I had some fans of the shows who took issue with with what you said about Native Americans. But again, we're going to have that conversation for another time, and I look forward to organizing that conversation for another time.
And we have in fairness, we have a whole group of foundational Black Americans that has done the research and who has traced their genealogy, who don't even associate themselves with Africa. They consider themselves as Aborigines. Now, I'll never give up my African identity. I consider myself an Afro-descendant, but that's another avenue of identity that we have to also incorporate. And they're oppressed as well. Their land was taken. And specifically here in the South where I am, you had Black tribes that were here before the European got here. Like I said, the Black American is not a guest. We're not guests here. We're just treated like guests because we've never asserted who we really are.
Okay. And all right. Well, that conversation is going to be continued, and I look forward to organizing that conversation one of these days. While I still have you on, because that's actually a very good segue this question, which is, I gave you a homework assignment, which was to watch the documentary John Pilger did in the late
Yes.
90s about post-apartheid South Africa called Apartheid Did Not Die. And for our audience, this is probably, when I put this on YouTube, this is probably a good part of the conversation where audiences need to pause, go watch that documentary of John Pilger so that they really understand what me and Elaina are about to talk about, as well as another documentary I sent Elaina, a two-part documentary called Dancing Around the Table, which we're going to get into, which was about the first Canadians, the Native Canadians, if you will, them trying to negotiate a new treaty with white Canada, white multiracial Canada. But before we get into that, so we're going to talk about the John Pilger film, Apartheid Did Not Die. And I wanted your assessment of that documentary and the tragic state of affairs in South Africa, and how can Black Americans in their long quest for social and racial justice, what can we learn from the mistakes of the ANC in our quest to force white America to address our grievances and make them give us justice for the over 2 centuries of racial terrorism and epic injustices inflicted on us?
Okay. Well, first of all, I really enjoyed the assignment, and I really enjoyed watching the documentary, and I learned a lot. One of the things that I noticed with the South Africans was there was no focus on the redistribution of the wealth. There was no compensation for the wealth that was extracted out of South Africa, taken from the people and redistributed amongst those Western entities, corporations, and people. That was the biggest issue. They had the numbers, and I don't advise violence, but there's a time when you have to use force. They had the numbers to really free South Africa. When they were at the negotiation table, a non-negotiable should have been, well, no, you're going to give back what you're taking. To get along with you, you don't get to take what you stole out of my house.
Exactly.
You give it back. And if you don't give it back, we have a problem. So that's what I learned. At the negotiation table, there are some things that are non-negotiables. Those people that murdered those children in the late 70s, early 80s, and some parts of the 90s, they should have been incarcerated. They should have been locked up and thrown away to keep. In order to get along with them, that shouldn't have been allowed. No truth and reconciliation should involve murderers that murdered whole towns of people, killed school children, should be walking around able to transfer their stolen booty to their next generation. That's ludicrous. And that's my position.
Yeah. So I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you on that. So what can the Black community then in the United States, or any or anyone suffering from settler-colonial, settler-colonialism, and not just racial apartheid, but economic apartheid, but let's just focus specifically on the United States. What can Black Americans and other colonized groups in the U.S., what can they learn from the not just mistakes? I think that's letting the ANC off way too easily, but the betrayals of the ANC in South Africa.
Well, the first thing that has to be done is an assessment. I know that their situation was a bit of an emergency situation because they were being murdered in droves and they just wanted the violence to stop. But at some point, you have to do a thorough assessment and weigh the pros and cons. Now, the violence, direct violence might have stopped, but how many bodies are dropping because of poverty? Poverty is a form of violence.
Yes, yeah. Gandhi says it's the worst
and the
form
theft,
of violence.
and the theft is still occurring. So what we as Afro-Descendants here in the United States can do is take a thorough assessment, weigh out all our options. I've looked at the options of going on the offensive. That's suicide and it's ludicrous. But we can maximize our numbers politically. We can maximize our numbers legally and withdraw our consent from this current parasitical relationship. And when we go into the bargaining table, we're going in for control. You won't get to keep the booty that you've taken and extracted out of our communities. You don't get to keep the land. We had whole towns here in the United States, all Black towns, what were burned down to the ground because our people had made certain advancements, such as Tulsa, Oklahoma, in Florida, in these different areas. We need to be compensated for that. And if they don't compensate us for that, there should be a consequence. Now we have the numbers, and we don't have to be violent. We can do a lot of things. We made our point in the 60s, and we can make our point again by withdrawing our consent to the to the colonial model that we're in, the internal colonial model that we're in. So what we can learn from South Africa is how to utilize our political power, how to utilize our legal power, how to utilize the international arena. And I'm not saying the UN and certain international agencies is the end all be all. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we need to know how to mobilize as well on a domestic level and on an international level, and how to get those partnerships that we need to put the pressure on the United States to get us where we need to go. As I stated before, once we perfect our confederated tribal nation, we will be the 12th largest nation in the world. We have the intellectual capacity to go to any country in Africa and help those countries get where they need to go. We can provide labor. We can provide a intellectual resource. We can provide anything that we can. We could be the next Cuba, go around helping not only just other African descendants, we can go all over the world and help oppressed people once we get ourselves together. But right now, we're just a mob. And one of the things that I also learned from the South African plight is that one thing out of all that oppression, the Africans had kept their cultural continuity and their source of unity intact. And Black Americans don't have that yet.
And quick follow up on that. Why is that, you think? Why is that, you think?
I think because some of us we prioritize the mere gratuities of that great job of enjoying a certain position in life, because whether we like it or not, we're rewarded for kicking our own people who look like us. We get rewarded for how harsh we can be towards each other. Fratricide just don't exist in urban America by the Black on Black crime and the gangs killing each other. Fratricide exists from the highest level of government. We have some Negroes in high places that need to be removed, that should not be speaking for other Blacks because they hate their own kind.
Colonial viceroys, right?
That's right.
Exactly.
We have a Black Miss Leader. We have a Black Miss Leadership class here in the United States on steroids.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So one thing that I did learn from the South Africans, they had that cultural continuity, that they're suffering no matter what realm they were in, no matter what status they enjoyed, from lawyers on down to the milkman. They knew their position.
And one can only hope that if the ANC is incapable of instituting justice in South Africa, one can only hope that that a new radical African-led party will do exactly will do exactly that. And that is a perfect segue to my second to last question, which is I also sent you the link to a 2-part documentary called "Dancing Around the Table," filmed in the 70s and in the early 80s in Canada. The film is about the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people negotiating a reformed constitution in Canada that would try to address their grievances, outline what their place in Canadian society is. And of course, the documentary shows the extreme difficulties the first Canadians were met when negotiating between the white, semi-multiracial Canadian federal and provincial government. What did you think about the documentary? And again, what can our people learn from this film? And what can Indigenous Hawaiians, Indigenous Alaskans, and the Native Americans, what can they learn from this documentary in their quest for justice and yeah, in their quest
I
for
really
justice?
appreciated how the chiefs highlighted that they had their own practices, their own culture that tied them back to the land. That is what stuck out for me, and what I appreciated the most. When they passed around the peace pipe and they had their adversary to partake.
Yeah.
For me, just that concession that that prime minister participated in was a gesture of respect. They made them respect who they were, the practices, and to acknowledge that they were this entity, this sovereign entity, that they had this highest aspiration of control of themselves. And when they offered that peace pipe and they brought their culture and kept stressing that that culture was there before they got there and it tied them back to the land, that's what stuck out with me. Now, that's a beautiful strategy. But one of the strategies that I did take issue with is that they were negotiating in the wrong jurisdiction. They should have been in an international jurisdiction such as the Inter-American Commission, Inter-American Court, or the European Court, bringing their grievance out of that jurisdiction because they sidestep certain international laws, such as the Fourth Geneva Convention, such as the 1960 Decolonization Conventions, that would have given other countries the opportunity to weigh in and to assist in this transition from a forced assimilation to real self-determination and real distribution of the resources, redistribution of the resources and the land. So that's what stuck out with me.
Fantastic response. And so if you could say you were hired to be a legal consultant, or even part of the legal team of putting aside Black people, but putting aside putting aside our people for a moment, and so say the Native Americans as a whole nation, a Native American nation, which includes Native Hawaiians and Indigenous Alaskans. Say they wanted to do what the first Canadians did, and they asked you for to legally represent them, or even to be a consultant. What would you suggest they do in effort to achieve justice against white America?
Now, one thing I want to stress again, I wouldn't do anything that I wouldn't do for my own people. So it's going to be hard for me to set my people aside.
Okay.
And I can't do that.
Yeah,
so
no problem.
What I want for them, I want for us as well. Not to minimize anything or take away anything that they've done or that they're doing or that we've gone through or they're going through, is I would admonish them to come in as a free association nation state, as a country. There's a model for that, the Lumi tribe. There is a model for that. We don't have the military might. They don't have the military might to go up against the United States, so they're going to have to organize legally and politically the same way we are. that would be suicide. The Native Americans don't have the military might to go up against the United States, but they could sure use those numbers and use that political will. Because guess what? That takes away the legitimacy out of their oppressive relationship. So that would be the first thing, to go in and declare their rights of self-determination as a free association nation state. And that will give them that layer of protection that they need, but they'll still have one foot within the United States where they can get the resources that they need to build themselves up and not lose anything, such as healthcare. They may not want to vote in their system, but I'm sure that they could use some of that equipment for policing. I'm sure that they could use some of that medical equipment. I'm sure they can use some of the resources that we have, surplus resources that the United States just have laying around. And as a free association nation state, they haven't just said, we don't want to be bothered with the United States. They're saying, no, until we get on our feet, we're part of you. We still want some of the gratuities that you got, and we want our piece of your pie that you took from us. And there's an accountability piece in there with that relationship. Then on top of that, they'll be able to do business with other indigenous peoples. You have the Sami people that spread it out across 4 states in Europe. They do a lot of fishing, have a lot of natural resources. They can develop their areas. They can have intellectual transfers to help develop these areas. We need to advance. The indigenous people and the Afro-Descendants need to advance their political expectations. We just can't stay where we are. The Native Americans just can't stay where they are. If you signed a treaty with the X in 1815, tear it up. This is 2021 and it's killing you. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see. And as I stated before, there is a example of this with the Lumi tribe up in Washington, D.C., that Native Americans throughout the Americas in Canada and the United States can follow.
Okay.
Now, and in order for them to maximize their numbers, because, you know, one of the reasons why Native Americans suffer so much is because they don't have the numbers that we have to provide security. We're 48 million strong. We have more numbers in terms of population than some African countries, some countries in Latin America. So we've done our research. We know what a powerhouse we can be internally within the United States in a positive manner, where we can relieve that pressure off the federal government. But for the Native Americans and the Hawaiian natives, and what they need to do is they need to create partnerships, form confederations. That's how their ancestors did it, and that's how our ancestors did it in those days when they fought colonialism, whether it was on the African continent or here. Form those partnerships so you can maximize your population. You know, I propose that, you know, African descendants and indigenous peoples, we in the Americas form a supranational entity where we all come together to the table. We look at the markets. We look at the cultural and intellectual transfers that we can do. We look at the advancements in natural herbs and remedies and medicines that we can do. I propose we form a federated union. They got the European Union, they got the African Union. Why don't we indigenous, Afro-descendant, and other oppressed groups, whether it's by language or whatever have we, why haven't we formed this entity? Where's our union here in the Americas?
I completely
agree. Where we can discuss security, where we can discuss economies, where we can discuss infrastructure, education, intellectual and cultural transfers. When are we going to have that conversation?
I completely agree. I would love to see a new organization, you know, similar to what Martin Luther King Jr. Was trying to do with the Poor People's Campaign. I would love to see something like that in the United States of all of the Native Americans, Indigenous Hawaiians, Indigenous Alaskans, Black people, our Latinx people, because their country, because half of Mexico was also stolen by the United States. So technically, they are also indigenous to this land.
That's true.
So I would love to see
and they have a
colonized
treaty,
people get together.
and they have a treaty and they have a treaty called the Treaty of Hidalgo Guadalupe that guaranteed them citizenship. They should revisit that treaty.
But yeah,
I'm speaking in terms of Latin, of our native Mexican brothers and sisters in Texas. Yes, they have treaties they need to revisit.
Yeah. So I would love to see that happen, because one of the reasons why I get so I mean, one reason, I mean, one of the few things that really inspires me when I follow Canadian politics is that the Black Lives Matter organization over there and the Native Lives Matter organization over there is starting to really, merge, build coalitions, build solidarity to say to white Canada, your days of white supremacy are outnumbered. And we see much of the white left in Canada address the grievances of environmental apartheid and all the other forms of apartheid that Indigenous people exist, as well as Black people. They're addressing that, and that's, I think, what needs to happen in the that's what I would love to see happen in the United States.
Well, and again, for us, I'm very careful about Black Lives Matter and other entities. I think the fight needs to come from the people. Each household needs to decide that they want to be self-determined. If the conversation is not about self-determination, control, and redistribution of wealth, those entities don't speak for me.
Mm-hmm.
I can't have a conversation with Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter raised a lot of money off the backs of fallen Black males. I haven't seen one community building that they put in a community. I haven't seen anything of consequence that's tangible that they've done towards nation building. So not to throw any shade on Black Lives Matter, they're just not an organization that would fit into my circle.
Well, I mean, it's all about and that's, yeah, that's very interesting. And
they need to really be held accountable for the money that they raise. They need to be transparent. That money needs to be traced down. I didn't see any collective tangibles that Black Lives Matter did since the Mark Brown issue in 2014. I didn't see a neighborhood they laid one hammer and nail on, one community building, and they got their momentum from that issue with Mark Brown. So
and
maybe I'm a little premature in my statement. I don't know, but that's just from what I see.
Oh, it's all right. It's all right. I also have my criticisms of the of Black Lives Matter nationally, which I think is called I hope I'm not mistaking the name, but I think it's called the Movement for Black Lives, or whatever is the organization, Black Lives Global something. But anywho, whatever Black Lives Matter organization in which one of their leaders is a woman called Alicia Garza. Yeah, I'm not on. Yeah, I don't show solidarity, and I wouldn't want our people, radical or integrationists to hook up with them because of their ties to the Democratic. Because their ties to the Democratic Party and the issues that she just raised. And that's a very good, and that's a pretty good, segue. I wasn't going to talk about this, but while it is Black Black History Month, would you, because you mentioned, that you're all about, self-determination, and when we first spoke, I know that you weren't a big fan of Martin Luther King Jr.'s approach to how to achieve justice for our people, because he thought that his integrationist approach was was just not the right approach. It was just not the right approach.
So it was nothing. Let me reiterate something.
Okay.
I respect the fact that he was out front and center, and the times were drastic, and he did what he thought could do. But being that I'm from Generation X, and I look at the death the blood that was spilled. I looked at all the things that they took, and he told, our people to turn the other cheek. For a vote, we gave up our own schools. For a vote, we gave up our own business. For a vote, we gave up our own way that we organized, our own land, we lost land. For a vote. Was it worth it? Where are we now? Where are we now in terms of development? We're still a surplus population that occupy the lowest rings of society. We still can be murdered in droves at any time. We have nothing in place. So that is my argument with his approach. As the man, what he done, he died. I have to respect that. But his strategy, his approach was off and lacking.
Talk about then talk about why the Malcolm talk about why the Malcolm X approach is a better better approach. And when talking about Malcolm, I don't mean Malcolm, the member of Nation of Islam that said that, hey, we want a divorce from we want a divorce from white America. Not that I'm against that idea, but I'm talking about the Malcolm X who wanted to make the issue international and started a new organization. And
well, I want to go back to the divorce from white America, or the divorce from the internal colonialism.
Okay.
Yes, we have to go back and revisit that, because there was a political relationship that we was encapsulated into without our consent. So we can't have that conversation. The government separated themselves from us when they enslaved our ancestors, whether it was on the continent of Africa or here. They separated us in their institutions and their constitution when they relegated us to 3/5 of a human being. So we have to go back to that relationship and put ourselves, that's what Malcolm was saying, we're on equal footing with you now. And to really be on equal footing, we have to pull ourselves out of the jurisdiction, which is a parasitical jurisdiction, where the cards were stacked against us domestically, into a neutral jurisdiction. Not to say that the United Nations was the end all be all, because you had at that same time Patrice Lumumba being murdered, and the UN was complicit. Just like they're complicit,
or what's happening in Haiti, or the formation
and what's happening in West Papua New Guinea. There's a genocide going on there right now, but everybody's crying crocodile tears about the UK, about the Ukraine.
And let's also not forget the the state of Israel was formed as a settler-colonial state off of the backs of the indigenous Palestinians.
Yes.
South Sudan, South Sudan.
Where's the tears? Where's the tears for Mali? Where's the tears for the colonialism that our people and other oppressed non-European people go through every day? What about Yemen, who's being bombed every day? Starvation. This is a Black country. Where are the tears for Yemen? Where are the tears for West Papua New Guinea? So I cannot have a conversation and leave this parasitical relationship out that Malcolm was talking about. We have to have that conversation, and we need to have that conversation with the United Nations, because there is a bias there. They're not as democratic as they say they are.
Exactly.
They don't follow the same processes and procedures that they propose that they do. The charter is human rights is selectively applied to who benefits Western countries. But we forget about the indigenous peoples. We forget about the melanated peoples, the African peoples who've been suffering intergenerationally year after year. Where's the conversation? Self-determination, self-sufficiency should apply to everyone across the board if we're going to have a democratic global society. If not, the UN needs to dismantle and we build something else. That being said, back to Malcolm.
Yeah.
Malcolm wanted to see true equality. When he was saying separate, I don't think he was saying, oh, we don't want to do business with white people. We don't want them in our areas. That's ludicrous.
Okay.
We have to live together where we want to or not. What he was talking about was the parasitical relationship. He was talking about a real wealth transfer, real equitable remedy. Stop lynching us. Stop killing us. Respect the fact that we're human beings just like you do. And not only respect that fact, get it in your constitution, put an amendment on the table. That's what Malcolm was talking about. He was saying, get out of this parasitical relationship, pull out of this parasitical jurisdiction to a neutral jurisdiction, to a jurisdiction where other people from all around the world could weigh in. And at that time, other African countries could have weighed in. Countries in Latin America who were colonized could weigh in. That's what Malcolm was saying. And there was nothing radical in that. That was common sense.
Completely agree with you. And I said that would be my final question, but I'm loving this conversation. I'm learning so much in this conversation. It's Black History Month. We have to have these radical conversations. Well, I agree with you. Common sense conversations, because I also hate that term radical. What people call radical, I say it's not radical, it's common sense. But then the last thing, this is my second to last thing, then I have to ask is sorry, I'm just completely blown away by all you said that I'm completely blanked out. But no, but I think going forward, so I think three things need to be done. Number one is we need a whole new leadership, and we need to approach the situation the way the Pendo Center for Human Rights and Self-Determination approaches it, right? And then
yes.
And if we are and when we get this negotiation with white America, it has to be under a neutral territory, because that's what you said was the mistake of the First Nations of of
under
Canada.
a neutral. Let me reiterate that.
Yeah.
Neutral jurisdiction. I mean table, Inter-American Commission. That's the jurisdiction here. That's our region. We should be at the table bringing these grievances, Afro-Descendants and the Indigenous people and other oppressed groups. You have oppressed group up in Virginia, the Appalachians, and they're white. They have grievances. They have environmental disasters there, and problems with working in those mines. We need to come to the table, but do it in a neutral jurisdiction, because the United States Constitution and its judicial system is not equipped to deal with the human rights violations that is done against its oppressed groups, encapsulated peoples. And I'm talking about, we're not guests here. And I want to continue to reiterate, the Black American, foundational Black American is not a guest here in the United States. We have a pre-colonial presence, just like the Native Americans. As a matter of fact, we fought beside them. Okay. And we assimilated with them.
And well, you already answered the third, the third most important point into how we get justice, which is while we do rebuild our own communities and we address the grievances of our own communities, we also stand in solidarity with other colonized people of the United States.
Yes, we can't, it's unfair. And this is what I found internationally when I'm talking to people like yourself and other advocates like themselves. We're asked about what are you doing? How are you partnering with the Native Americans? Self-preservation comes first, but we're not trying to take away from their pain. We want to help alleviate their pain, and we want them to help us, because again, we fought side by side. Some Native American tribes took us in, took our ancestors in. When they would run off those plantations, they provided somewhere for them to go. We were not enemies. We were not enemies to all indigenous people here in the United States. We worked together with them. So we have to find our way together. maximize our numbers together, partner together, have that intellectual exchange, cultural exchange that we need to advance our people so we can remove ourselves from these genocidal conditions. If anything were to happen today, Black America is not prepared. If we were to be encamped and carted off the FEMA camps, we can't even put up a fight. And nobody would even put up a fight for us internationally because nobody has heard our voice because we confine ourselves domestically.
Yeah.
Using a law that suppresses against us and continue to advance a parasitical relationship that's handing our youth intergenerational poverty, fratricide, and genocide on a daily basis.
Perfect. And just before I close, I'm going to get to the last question. I also wanted to mention that yes, in the future we're definitely going to organize a conversation, I hope, with either an Indigenous voice, hopefully one from the United States, and one of the Canadian voices that I wanted to bring on to talk about the issues you raised in this conversation and in our last conversations about some of the grievances that you say Black people do have with certain Native American tribes. So I'm looking forward to
in the United States.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation if one could be organized. And just before I let you enjoy the rest of your Sunday, Elaina, we usually end the show by doing this quick questionnaire that Marcel Proust and Bernard Pivot would do with their guests, and James Lipton of Inside the Actors Studio would do with his guests. So in memory of him, and before I let you go, Elaina, so let's do this. What is your favorite word?
Liberty, liberation.
What is your least favorite words?
Oppression.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Reading.
Fantastic. What turns you off though?
Hate.
What is your favorite curse words?
Damn.
What sound or noise do you love?
Chimes.
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 Oh, like the wind chimes.
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. What sound or noise do you hate?
Oh gosh. Oh, let's see, the sound of noise that I hate. Oh, anything loud. Crashes, booms, crashes and booms.
Okay. And if you weren't doing what you do, what profession other than yours would you like to attempt to do?
If I was not doing what I'm doing, let's see, a head of state.
Head of state? You would be a very good head of state. And what profession would you not like to do under any circumstances?
Nursing.
Nursing, all right. And the final question before I let you enjoy the rest of your weekend with your family. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive to the afterlife, when you arrive at the pearly gates, or whatever is the afterlife you believe in?
All peoples of the planet are free.
Fantastic. Wow, we were joined on this brilliant edition of 1+1 with Elaina Porter, who is a member of the Pendo Center for Human Rights and Self-Determination. Again, I can't stress enough that she really does that she and her team really do follow the tradition of the late great Paul Robeson and W.E. Du Bois' We Charge Genocide campaign, and they really do follow the tradition of Malcolm X's anti-colonialism and the people power that he envisioned. Elaina, thank you so much for coming back on the program. And again, I really look forward to having you back in the future to talk about to talk about that overlooked issue that you think Black America and Native Americans have. And I look forward to having hopefully a panel discussion on that. And and that being said, even if I may not agree with all of it, I know for a fact you do stress that our people and Native Americans should be united in overthrowing white supremacy, which is one of the reasons why why I deeply respect you, and hopefully we will see our people.
And I think we should be uniting legally and politically by considering a supranational entity.
Exactly.
And that way we can maximize our numbers.
Exactly. And I really do hope that we see what we see in Canada with the Black Canadian justice groups and the Native Lives Matter there. I really hope that we can see that happening in the United States soon, because the people united, that's much better. The people united will never be defeated, and all marginalized working class people do need to unite to end the ghastly system that is white supremacy and white capitalism.
Thank you so much, Youri.
So Elaina, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a real honor, and looking forward to getting back in touch with you soon, hopefully.
I am here. Thank you.